Wednesday night, AEW returns to Daly's Place in Jacksonville for the first time since going back on the road. The card on Wednesday night is stacked for AEW Dynamite Homecoming, including the highly anticipated match between Cody Rhodes and Malakai Black. With us today to discuss AEW Dynamite Homecoming is Executive Vice President Cody Rhodes. So without further ado, we're going to turn the call over to Cody for some opening remarks, and then we'll open the lines for your questions. Cody?
Hello. As always, it's great to be with you on these calls. It really has been quite a year, and being on the road for shows for the last month has been wonderful. We are really enlivened as a company to come back to Jacksonville for the homecoming edition of Dynamite. Before we jump into any questions, I just want to go ahead and preface, I know that there are many rumors and speculations floating around. I won't be commenting on any of that, so please don't waste your question by asking about rumors. With that said, I'm excited to get started. Let's bring on the questions. Thank you all.
Okay, so here, we're going to do this as we normally do. Thanks, Cody. I'm going to call on Louis Dangor from Gimme Sport, and I would like to have Stephanie Francone from Steel Chair ready to go next. Louis, you're up.
Hi, Cody. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. I wanted to ask, obviously, Malakai Black's arrival in AEW was a lot sooner than people would have anticipated, given his, I know he's spoken now about his 30 days instead of his 90 days as it should have been. Can you speak about you, I guess, finding out that he could come in earlier than I'm sure you guys would have anticipated as well? And then any potential plans that I guess had to be changed considering he was able to come in sooner than anticipated?
Well, from my understanding, no plans have been changed. Whenever there's a free agent of that caliber, male or female, you have to jump on it, and that's not an area where I was the one who contacted or facilitated it. This is the same guy who kicked me square in the jaw on his very first night to make a statement. Tony Khan is responsible for bringing in Tommy End or Malakai Black, whatever he'd like to go by, but no plans were changed. If anything, we were presented with something incredibly special. Dynamite is the heart and soul of the company and what we do, and being able to put these matches on television, this is huge. Today I just watched Jason Isbell and various other celebrities, Paul Walter Hauser, comment on who they think is going to win. That's so special because this is about our weekly television show, and it is not the classic old school, let's save it for the pay-per-view, let's stretch it out when really we only do 4 pay-per-views a year. Again, TV is where our bread is buttered, and this is a massive match for homecoming. In addition to that, it's a massive card. So him not having the traditional 90 days, but having 30 days really worked in our favor. But again, we'll all find out together, everyone on this call and myself, if the magic is there and if the passion is there, because as AEW fans can attest, you can tell right away with a free agent, with someone new coming in, it's all about the passion. Great question.
Thanks, Louis. Okay, Stephanie Francone is going to be next, and following Stephanie will be Michael Shalik from SE Scoops. Steph, you're up.
Hi, Cody. How are you today?
I feel like you're always the second question is called, so and I've gotten used to it, and I love it. I'm very good. I hope you are well.
It's magic. It's all magic. I don't know, but thank you for this call once again. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Malakai Black recently, you mentioned the fact that Jake the Snake Roberts, who was also on the AEW roster, was a big influence for him when it comes to promos and the promo work and also the attitude. When you think about Jake, because you know him very well. Do you see a lot of Jake the Snake Roberts in this character that Malakai Black is? Thank you.
Well, that's a great question. I think I don't want to really say heel or babyface in this setting, but everyone who has that layer of kind of mysteriousness to them, every wrestler, they do have a little bit of Jake Roberts in them, and they're probably actively trying to have more because he was so good at translating a story and also presented himself so differently from the other wrestlers of his time. I'm actually, this is the first time I'm hearing it, that there's a connection there with the two, and I'm glad to hear it because people like Jake Roberts, luminaries like Jake Roberts and Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, et cetera, to have them backstage at All Elite Wrestling is like having the book right at your disposal on how to be successful in wrestling. And you'd be surprised at how many of us young yahoos argue back and forth on how we should do things when they're sitting right there. Guys who have made, no hyperbole with the statement, millions of dollars, and they're contributing now. Jim Ross is another example. These luminaries, these legends, jumped on board to come to a startup wrestling company that 3 years ago nobody was fully thinking would become what it has become today as we really settle into this golden age of wrestling on television. So that's good to hear that Jake is inspiring to talent still, and he will continue to do so. I'd personally like to thank Jake because I teach a developmental class. I don't know if we can say developmental class, but I teach a group of young wrestlers often before call time at television, and Jake has been there with me for every one of those classes. And if I'm being totally honest, he's a far better teacher and far more qualified than I am, and he's been incredibly helpful with young people, people like Brock Anderson, people like Lee Johnson, who's wrestling Miro for the TNT Championship. I'm rooting for Lee for the most coveted title in wrestling at Dynamite's homecoming tomorrow. So yeah, big shout out and props to Jake.
Thanks, Cody, and thanks, Steph. Michael Shalek from SE Scoops is next, and on the on-deck circle is Stephanie Chase from Digital Sky. Excuse me. Without further ado, let's go with Michael, and I'll get the name right here in a minute. Michael?
Hey, Cody. I hope fatherhood is treating you well.
Oh, thank you so much. It really is. It's like all the things people tell you, but you don't believe, and then it's its own magical thing that I can't even describe. I'm a pro wrestler, so a lot of what I've done my whole life is very self-serving. The moment I saw her, I could care less about me, and it became about what I can do for her, and that's just so special. She's 9 pounds and 5 ounces now, and she's growing and making squeaky noises, and just is the most beautiful thing on earth. She looks exactly like her mother.
That's great. I'm a new father myself, so I can relate.
Yay!
So, the free agent market right now is booming. So, granted, you can't sign everybody. Even with AEW's expanding programming schedule, there's only so many spots on the roster. There's only so much room on the budget. That said, there's certain performers out there where if you're available, it's almost like, how do you not get this person if they're out there? So my question, without speaking about anybody specifically, what is AEW's current appetite for talent acquisition? And is there room to sign 5 more people, or are we pretty much at capacity right now?
Well, that's a great question. I think I tell a lot of my peers in wrestling and people who use me as a sounding board and I use as a sounding board, I always tell them you can't wish away good talent, especially when you get in a groove as a talent yourself. And it's not unlike the world that Tony comes from already. the world of the NFL and football in the UK, if there's a free agent out there that can move the needle and be something significant for us, I personally, I'm not saying this from the company perspective, personally, I think you have to go after them. And does that change the landscape of the show and the roster? For sure, but that is one of the areas where, as much as things can get personal, it is business, and no one is immune from that. We're doing wonderful. We have added Rampage coming up on the schedule, of course, and I'm so excited about. I am getting ready to go into a season of the second season of Go Big Show. Road to the Top will be attached to Dynamite. I mean, there's a lot of AEW programming. So room has opened up, but to your point, it's not incredibly that much more room. I don't know the specifics of 5 or 6 or 7 or 3 or whatever. I don't know the number, but if you're asking me, the executive vice president of the company, one of the executive vice presidents, I say the more the merrier. And I also would say it's very fulfilling for me personally as a wrestler, and I hope the Bucks and Kenny feel this way as well. It's very fulfilling to know that 3 years ago, not a lot of people believed in the revolution. The fans believed in it, and that's why it existed. But not a lot of people believed in it, and they weren't comfortable, perhaps, with it. And we set this table, and now new people can eat. And Tony, of course, is at the head of all of that. But that, to me, I have no bitterness in my heart over that. That makes me feel wonderful about a legacy in the professional wrestling industry. The table's been set. New talent can eat. Young talent can eat. And that's great, because I grew up with the wrestling business being the backbone of my family. To be able to leave it better than I found it certainly means a lot. A lot of room to grow, though. A lot of room to grow. Great question.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, Stephanie Chase from Digital Spy is next, and following Stephanie will be Chris Mueller from Bleacher Report. So, Steph, you're up.
Hi, Cody. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today.
Well, thank you for taking the time to listen to me very much. Thank you.
With AEW back on the road now, I was wondering, we saw the show last week. You announced a show for Chicago that's only just a few weeks away. How much has AEW got an idea of their live touring schedule for the rest of the year, all being well with the pandemic? And how close are we to a show in the UK, which people over here want so much, and shows in the West Coast as well, and Canada? How much of that have you guys plotted out, or at least as much as you can with what's going on?
Well, domestically, Raphael and Chris Harrington, the EVPs, and Tony Khan, we do have a good layout of where we'd like to go. We also had a lot of shows that would be makeup shows that have now been scheduled and locked in because of the global pandemic and everything that happened to all of us. So we've got a great calendar strung out ahead of us in terms of it's fairly well mapped out. I don't want to give a false number on that, but there's a full touring schedule from East Coast to the West Coast. When it comes to the United Kingdom, I feel like I eat my words on this, but it wasn't my fault that global pandemic happened. But the United Kingdom is a massive part of what we do. It's massive. They are some of the best wrestling fans on the planet. I had always envisioned that match with Anthony Ogogo was meant to happen in the United Kingdom. I just would revel in that whole fun patriotic battle. But a lot of that is going to fall on what happens with the variant itself, with vaccinations, and with health and safety, because we need the fans to be healthy and we need the crew to be healthy. We're able to make changes, as we've seen in the past year, being a company that really led the way in how to do television during a pandemic. So I can't say that it's for sure going to happen, But I can say if you run a wrestling company and you don't intend on going to the UK, then I don't think you really run a wrestling company. So it's in our minds. It's just not on a schedule just yet. But we owe it to the United Kingdom, our partners at ITB, and I hope it's something we can accomplish.
Thanks, Stephanie and Cody. Okay, Chris Mueller, you're up next from Bleacher Report, and following Chris will be Jim Barcelone from the Miami Herald. Chris?
Hey, Cody. So I wanted to get your opinion on last week's main event with Nick Gage. Just what was your opinion of the match in general, and as an EVP, what's your overall opinion on deathmatch wrestling, and does it have a place in mainstream pro wrestling?
Great question. I think the match was as advertised. Chris Jericho, or that night, the Painmaker, and Nick Gage were very clear about a death match and what you were going to get. It went on in the second hour, and it was indeed as advertised. I, before AEW was a thing, had considered doing a death match with Matt. I feel like I'm going to butcher his last name, but Tremont. I had really heavily considered it, and I never pulled the trigger on that. But that was indeed a death match, and I think the answer to your question about does it have a place in television, well, we were the #1 show on cable, and that is a huge honor. 3 weeks in a row, that's a huge honor and responsibility to our fan base. During the Olympics, we're the #1 show on cable. So yes, I think it does have a place. I don't think it's something you will see often. That's just my opinion as asked for. I don't think it's something you'll see often, and I think it's important that you balance your show out with, sure, there was this death match between the Painmaker and Nick Gage, unbelievable match, but also there are wrestlers on our roster who try to present a little bit more of a family aspect to what they do, a little bit more clean cut. There are wrestlers that are a little bit more geared towards children in terms of building a younger fan base, and that's really what makes this wonderful buffet of wrestling. So yeah, I do think there's a place for it. I don't think it's something you'll see often on our product, but there's definitely a place for it, and kudos to those guys for putting themselves through that and having a great main event.